Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Wednesday, February 26th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeanie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again absolutely free. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one, where people have been stepped through that worksheet process. And if you choose to listen to them even repeatedly, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you and help you get maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. You can also go to your App Store and type in the three words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. And if you choose to do that before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet. It contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and it contains a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. We hope people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. And secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, testimonials. If you have any of those to share with us, we'd appreciate you doing so by giving us a call at 563-999. Don't finish that number. That's on autopilot. By emailing me, you can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org, or you can email Jeanie at jeanie@yagain.org. That's whyagain.org. And if we get a comment or a question from you, a testimonial or some kind of a insightful answer, we'll address it on the Internet show. And then as time allows, send you a notification about what day and time that occurred so you can listen back to the archives for your feedback or input. And we greatly appreciate whenever anybody chooses to do that, because it makes it infinitely easier for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be a service, and that's just so much easier to do when we have input from you. If you're listening to us on live.needle.com/mindshiftersradio, we're glad you're here, glad you're listening, and yet you can't type in a comment or raise a hand to talk to us directly unless you go to your App Store and download the Needle app. It's N-E-D-L, Needle, AI tuner for live radio. If you do that, download the app, sign in, answer a couple questions, then you'll have the option to talk to us directly or type a comment in the app. And we greatly appreciate whenever anybody does that, because it just makes it so much easier for us to know how these things are landing for you. And It gives us good feedback about what direction we should take the show or the next episode of the show, and it's like having a modified version of our support groups that we do, where the support groups also work far better when people call in and actively participate and talk about what's working for them and what's not. We had a support group last night, and we had a brand new person show up in the support group, and we had 3 different worksheets that got done in the support group time period, and lots of discussion. The thing that I was left with most and thinking about most this morning is the idea of perspective and view. And one of the things that we talked about, and we get talked to about from these different books we're reading, is the idea that, like the Way of Mastery and Course in Miracles both have the idea that you create whatever meaning you give to the situations and events in your life, to the interactions with people, etc. And nothing has any meaning for you than the meaning you give it. What does that mean? Well, for some people, their prized possession is more important than their best friendship. And for other people, their relationships and friendships with people are far more important than any possession. And so in this book that we're reading, titled Of Course in Miracles, subtitled When Love Becomes a Way of Life, and the book's written by Alan Cohen, he weaves in and out of stories that he has, quotes from the Course in Miracles, whether it's the workbook or the text or the teacher's manual. And the essence of an observation, like, why wait for heaven? It's here today, from the workbook, 131, that we were, he quoted that in the last lesson that we read, is you get to decide. Are you living in heaven or are you living in hell? The outside events in your life don't determine whether you're living in what you would consider to be heaven or hell. So you have the choice. One of the ways that you create that difference is the meaning you create or choose, or the interpretation you choose and then apply to your life situation. Another way to talk about that is, what is your point of view? What is your perspective on a given situation? If I'm looking at a situation from an adult perspective, life experiences of 30, 40, 50, 60 years, I get one set of understandings and interpretation and meaning for an event. If I'm looking at that same series of events from the perspective of a 5-year-old or a 12-year-old, I get an entirely different perspective and therefore set of meanings and therefore interpretation. And we are being invited to change every interpretation we create that leaves us feeling less than calm, less than connected, less than loving, less than compassionate, less than creative. And that theme is a life life-changing tool all by itself. If you never had the Reality Management Worksheet, if you never had the EFT tapping, you never had the neuro-emotional technique, you never had the bioenergetic synchronization technique, you never learned Psy-K, you never learned coherence therapy, you just had the idea that every time you're experiencing a discomfort, a negative emotional state, or an emotion that you don't prefer to have, or you interpret something as being bad or wrong, if you just had the tool that let you know, oh, in this moment, I can choose a different way to look at this situation, to give it a different meaning, to give it a different interpretation, to pour my mind energy into different thoughts, and instantaneously change my internal experience, whether it's of physical discomfort or an emotion or a meaning that I'm giving to certain thoughts. If you just had that tool and nothing else, you could change your life. You could change your experience of life. And that's what we're being invited into on a regular basis. That's why we open the door for that kind of a difference in our change in perspective every time we do a worksheet process and we say, I cancel my need to be right, and I cancel my need for anyone or anything to change, including myself. And I specifically cancel any goal I might be holding in the moment when I'm feeling a tightness or a tension or a discomfort. And I just ask to be able to spin that kaleidoscopic wheel of interpretation to choose again, to choose a meaning or an interpretation or a way to understand what's going on from a perspective that leaves me feeling better. Now, some people say that's sticking your head in the sand, and I disagree. That has not been my experience. It just helps me shift my energy so that I'm not creating distortions in my perception which leave me feeling stuck, hurt, angry, sad, scared, frustrated, etc. Guy Finley has a part of what he teaches where he says, there's a mechanical level of your mind that just keeps churning and doing whatever it's been programmed to do. And it will just keep doing it anytime it's, stirred into activity. Now, that mechanical level of mind in Guy Finley's work is very similar to, if not identical to, what Dr. Michael Ryce calls carbon-based memory, or the 9-bit mind. It's very similar to or identical to what the Way of Mastery refers to as the intellect. And your intellect has been shoved full of trivialities like garbage in a garbage can, and all it can do is spit back out to you what's been shoved into it. So whatever you can do to initiate a change in perspective for yourself, whatever you can do to move towards 100% responsibility for whatever experience you're creating in a given moment, then to whatever degree you're able to do that, you're in accepting the invitation of this work, which is to shift the meaning you're giving the events in your life and the interactions you have in your life. And it came to me today, and I'm not sure it's translating well, but based on the group we had last night and the 3 different worksheets and what was bouncing around in my head this morning and the things I was working on and listening to, is the idea of changing my perspective, which is woven into the worksheet process. I ask to be shown the hidden part of my mind. Well, if I'm tooling around in life and I'm only aware of my conscious part of my mind, then I need to change my perspective so that I can get access to what I'm not consciously aware of. And it came to me to say, let's go back and revisit when she decided to write a letter from unconditional love. And Liz Gilbert has this practice where she sits down, gives herself 10 or 15 minutes to sit down, and she writes at the top of the piece of paper, a blank piece of paper, she writes, "Dear love, what would you have me know today?" And then she just writes whatever comes to her, as though unconditional love were sending her a letter or giving her a download. And when Glennon Doyle did that, she ended up with a very powerful piece, what I consider to be a very powerful piece, on forgiveness. So here's that letter. Okay, let's talk about forgiveness. I've been dying for somebody to explain forgiveness to me for so long. And Glennon Doyle then writes, okay, so I'm going to ask unconditional love to explain forgiveness to me. Unconditional love writes back to Glennon, what are the chances? I know. Anyway, let's talk about forgiveness. I love that you're still chasing this idea. I love that you absolutely refuse to pretend to understand it. I love that you let ideas that you don't understand drive you absolutely nuts. These big ideas like forgiveness, they flash around on the periphery of your mind like the sliver of silver on a fish's back, or a shooting star that you think you saw, or a firefly that was right there. Oh, well, no, wait, it's over there. Oh, wait, where'd it go? Some people are okay with these glimpses, and they just get on with their life. But you, Glennon, you can't go on until you've chased down and trapped the firefly of an idea in a jar, and then you've stared at it so long that you know it's real, and you know that you understand it in your bones, that you can testify to it even. Sometimes the firefly idea suffocates to death in your jar. That's true. However, I still love this about you, and is what makes our relationship so promising. Because you're always right on my heels, Glennon. It's funny, though, you've never before invited me to stop. You just keep chasing me. You've never before said, wait, sit down with me so I can ask you my questions, and you can tell me what you know. You don't actually have to keep chasing and killing fireflies, Glennon. We can talk. We can just talk, and I'll tell you all about them. Let's start with forgiveness. You're right not to believe in forgiveness. It's not because forgiveness isn't real. It's just because it's never once been explained to you correctly. You just don't believe in the wrong version of forgiveness. Well done. Congratulations. Let's first review all those forgiveness ideas that you rejected because they died in your jar. You're right. Forgiveness is not about letting go. Forgiveness is not about finally understanding. Forgiveness is not about deciding if someone or something did something to you that's right or wrong. Forgiveness is not about not feeling mad anymore. It's not about a gift to bestow or withhold. Forgiveness has absolutely nothing to do with decisions or feelings or actions or relationships. It's not about being a bigger person or a good person morally or your choice of morality. Forgiveness is about distance. It's about perspective. I had to find my place in the writing. It's about zooming out. And then Unconditional Love says to Glennon, remember those highlight magazines you used to read over and over again when you were little because it was the only reading material at the babysitter's house? Remember the pages at the end that had those little puzzles? One was called something like The Magic Picture. And the idea was that you would study a picture of something that was completely indecipherable, impossible to identify. Well, there was one picture that you stared at for hours trying to figure it out. It was swirly and glimmery. It had tiny silver lines flashing throughout. It looked to you like magical crystal and purple mountains, or hills with rivers traversing them. You finally turned the page to see the follow-up picture, and that's the big reveal, the answer, the key. The truth is, it was simply the exact same image, but zoomed out 1,000 times. And then you saw now that the picture was an entire forest with one humongous tree, with one massive leaf upon which a dragonfly was perched. Attached to the dragonfly were two beautiful wings made up of those shimmery purple mountains. They were actually the scales of a dragonfly's wing. Well, Glennon, it's been 40 years and you still remember both those images like they were the most important pictures you'd ever seen. And here's why. For today. So I could use them to help you understand forgiveness. Forgiveness is not deciding whether your father's anger was right or wrong, okay or not okay. Forgiveness is looking at one of those moments. You're 13, he is yelling, you are afraid. It's a magic picture. And then eventually, after you've looked at that moment for years, decades maybe, however long it takes, to let that scared little girl speak, to let her say every last thing she needs to say about how confused and lonely she was, to let her say every last thing she needs to say about how she wishes it were different, and about what she needed and didn't get after she said every last thing she needs to say, and she assures you that she feels heard and safe, and she can promise you that after all of that, forgiveness is turning the page. It's zooming out 1,000 times. It's seeing the same image, but now it's an entire lifetime you're seeing. And maybe now you also see your dad when he was 10. And this time it's him and his father. And it's not just yelling, it's hitting too. And then what you see is his father with his father. And he's small and hungry and afraid. And now it's his father. And they're on a ship fleeing a famine. And it's his father with his father. And none of this is okay or not okay. You see, it's all just what is and has been. You just see all of what is and has been. If you want to know what God is just a better view. And forgiveness is just zooming out 1,000 times until you have my view. My view is just, well, you know that thing they call Google Earth? How you can Google one address and zero in on it? And then you can zoom out until you see the street, and then the neighborhood, and then the continent, and now the planet from a point in outer space. My view is just, well, it's like I can Google Earth every last one of you, and then zoom out forever until I see not just your planet, but the entire universe. And then the beginning of time until the end of time, and I can see it all at once. And Glennon, I promise you, from where I stand, every single one of you makes perfect sense. That's why you people have to think of heaven as so far above, because you know that heaven is just perspective. Someday you'll have a perspective like mine, wide enough to hold the whole world, and you'll forgive everybody. Then it'll be automatic. It's just what happens when you can see. For now, you just keep zooming out. You just stand back and see everybody, and especially yourself, as wide and as high as you possibly can. You make perfect sense. Your Father makes perfect sense. Every last one of you does. Every single one of you is just a magic picture. And I get to see the second image. And that is forgiveness. So in that last paragraph, there's this idea about heaven is just perspective. And that comes right back to the quote from the Course in Miracles that was in the book that Alan Cohen wrote, where it's, I read it just before we started this. Why wait for heaven? It's here today. Change your perspective. Change the interpretation that you're giving to life events. Change the meaning that you're placing on life events, and you instantly in that moment change the impact upon you. The impact upon you of life and of your thoughts and your choices as a creator, as someone who has dominion over the focus of your conscious awareness in any given moment. And it is literally the focus of your conscious awareness in any given moment that creates your experience of life. That's the message that's coming from Glennon Doyle's writing about forgiveness. That's the message that's coming from Alan Cohen in his book, A Course in Miracles, of Course in Miracles, When Love Becomes a Way of Life. And it's the interpretation and the meaning behind how a reality management worksheet can be so productive. Because if the outside events in my life were causing my upset, it wouldn't make any sense whatsoever to pick up a worksheet. The only thing that would make sense is if I'm feeling sad, angry, scared, hurt, grief, shame, anything like that, is to go change the outside events. If my emotions are caused by the people and situations outside of me, it'd be a complete waste of time to pick up a reality management worksheet. The good news is I only feel the impact of the choices I've made, where I focus my conscious awareness and the interpretations I choose and place on life events. The good news is the mechanism that generates my emotional state and response to life is inside me. And that's why a reality management worksheet can offer me a shift in perspective. That's why in every reality management worksheet I say I cancel my need to be right. I cancel every meaning I've given to this situation that's resulting in me feeling a negative emotional state that prompted me to pick up the worksheet in the first place. Every negative emotion I experience is self-induced nonsense, or it's my alarm system designed by this system that created me as a physical body and a consciousness to let me know whenever my thinking is less than 100% accurate. It may not be way off the mark, or it might be completely irrational. And yet the alarm system that nudges me to start looking at that, exploring it, questioning it, and perhaps asking to be shown a different way to look at things is my negative emotional experience in any moment. So again, I will reiterate that we are welcoming comments and questions. If you're joining us through the Needle app, you have the option to type in a comment or press the phone icon and actually talk to us directly. If you're listening live, thank you for being here at live.needle.com/mindshiftersradio. However, that leaves you without the option to type in a comment or raise a hand to talk to us directly. For that, you'll have to download the Needle app, N-E-D-L, Needle, AI for Live Radio. Download the app, open it, log in, answer a couple questions, and we can have a conversation. So how is this landing for you? How is the thought that you can change your experience of life by simply shifting the focus of your consciousness? Guy Finley summarizes it as goes my attention, so comes my experience. I talk about it as, I'd like to tell you two things about yourself as a human being. The first thing is, as a human being, you have the infinite capacity to choose the focus of your conscious awareness in each new present moment. The second thing is, it is actually the focus of your conscious awareness in each new present moment that determines your experience of life in that moment. So mine's a little wordier, and yet they're pointing at the same thing. As goes my attention, so comes my experience. So how's this landing for you? What kind of questions might this be raising for you? Raise a hand, type in a comment. So Linda typed in, she has gratitude for reading Glennon Doyle's Letter to God again, or Letter to Unconditional Love again. Thank you. So Linda? And please remember, even if I seem to be in the middle of a monologue or reading something, we welcome comments or callers. And there doesn't seem to be any other comment or anybody calling, so I'll return to the book that we're reading with commentary from Alan Cohen. The book title is Of Course in Miracles. The subtitle is When Love Becomes a Way of Life. And in the book, we were just about to start the 20th chapter, which Alan titles Your Divine Toolbox. Alan writes, my friend Brenda owns a successful restaurant in Seattle. She and her husband have worked hard for years to build its reputation and clientele. The couple has 3 children, ages 19, 17, and 15. Brenda confessed to me, quote, soon all of our kids will be out of the nest. I'm afraid we've missed the best years of our lives and theirs because we were so focused on the restaurant while they were growing up. If we had to do it all over again, I would be with my family during those precious years and build our business after they grew up, close quotes. Alan writes, the world gives us many tools to achieve success according to its standards. Yet, it does not guide us to be successful spiritually. Abraham Maslow is quoted here as saying, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything you see looks like a nail, close quotes. Abraham Maslow was known as the father of humanistic psychology. If your only tools are a body and an intellect, you will be able to only navigate the domain of bodies and intellects. and then you will gain the world but miss your soul. A yogi describes the physical dimension as, quote, alluring but ultimately unsatisfying, close quotes. Alan writes, A Course in Miracles provides a deep toolbox with many instruments to guide us home. However, we have to put them into practice. A friend of mine bought a reduce your belly abdominal exercise machine. I asked him, how'd that work for you? He said, the damn thing didn't work. I threw it in the trash. How much did you use it? I asked. Well, he said, maybe 5 minutes a week. Lots of people tell me that they started A Course in Miracles but didn't know how to make it work in their lives. So I would ask them, did you use the workbook? And they would reply, no, I didn't get that far. Or they would reply, I got to lesson 30, but then put it aside. And Alan says, you can't blame a tool for not working if you don't use it. 12-step programs, like Alcoholics Anonymous say, the program works if you work the program. And the same is true with A Course in Miracles. This course, these tools, will give back as much or as little as you invest in it. Alan writes, I've often been prone to user error. I blame things for not working, when in truth I did not operate them properly. Dee and I built a cottage in a remote area, which we powered with photovoltaic solar panels. When we returned after an extended absence, that system wasn't working. I grew upset with the engineer who installed the system and blamed him for faulty equipment or faulty installation. When he came out to repair the product, he informed me that I did not keep sufficient water in the batteries. Oops. It's easier to blame than it is to take responsibility. While some people complain that A Course in Miracles is too complicated, it is actually quite simple. There are really only two tools to choose from, the ego or the Holy Spirit. Choose fear or choose love. Choose illusion or choose truth. Each tool reinforces and takes us deeper into the thought system that upholds that tool. Ego hides in complexity. It hides in the world and details, and it embellishes it. In spirit, details distract. Nicholas Murray Butler, president of Columbia University, president of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and a recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, said, quote, an expert is someone who knows more and more about less and less until he knows absolutely everything about nothing. Close quotes. If you're going to become an expert at anything, let it be inner peace. A Course in Miracles teacher Michael Murdad said, quote, whenever you process through the Course in Miracles, the intellect rather than the heart, you crucify the Christ all over again. So, this reminds me of my saying for the past couple of years where I say, the way of mastery is inviting us to choose an entirely different primary user interface for life. We've been raised to think the intellect is our primary user interface. But the way of mastery is inviting us into the use of the wide open, awakened heart as our primary user interface, and our intellect as a very limited, a very simple tool to be picked up and used from time to time and then put aside. I just checked the comments, and Cammie's asking if the group from last night is available on recording. And upon request, Cammie, I can send you, if you want to email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. I can email you a link to a private copy of that. So Michael Murdad says, whenever you process the Course of Miracles through your intellect rather than your heart, you crucify the Christ all over again. When you engage life from your intellect, and then you have any kind of a negative experience, you know that your intellect is missing the mark, that you're arranging this wonderful flow of life into perspectives and interpretations and truth for you, lowercase t, truth for you, that's not full. It's not the whole truth. It's not the totality of existence. It's not the truth of life itself. It's not your mind connected to the one Christ mind. It's not operating from divine insight and intuition. Alan writes, we can understand A Course in Miracles somewhat through the mind, but that boat will take us just so far. It's not equipped to cross the ocean of samsara. Only the soul provides worthy transport. And then he quotes A Course in Miracles from the textbook where it says, this is a very simple course, close quotes. Anthropologist Jane Goodall made the breakthrough discovery that chimpanzees, just like human beings, make tools. She observed chimps taking a reed and poking it into a crevice in the wood to dislodge termites that the chimpanzees could then eat. We might think of A Course in Miracles as a breakthrough tool to help us dislodge the termites of ego so they don't eat away the foundations of our life. If we want to be smart monkeys, we can practice this summary of Course in Miracles. Quote, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. In other words, as a quote from the Course in Miracles, do not see error, close quotes. And then he quotes the Course in Miracles from the textbook saying, all healing is essentially the release from fear, close quotes. Any tool that reduces fear is worth using. In the documentary titled Dishonesty, The Truth About Lies, and in that title it's parentheses, DIS, close parentheses, and then capital H, honesty, the truth about lies. In that documentary, a man recounts that he was on an airplane that encountered severe turbulence. A woman sitting near him was screaming, we're going to crash and all of us will die. In the documentary, the man told the woman that he was a structural engineer and there was no possible way the plane was going to crash. The woman calmed down considerably. The truth is, the man was not a structural engineer at all. Yet his life saved this woman emotionally, along with the other passengers that her fright was spreading to. The man's lie was closer to the truth than her terrified mindset. The man employed a lighter illusion to offset a darker illusion, replacing a nightmare with a happier dream. Tools are vehicles through which we give ourselves permission to be healed. While we may use prescription drugs, surgery, acupuncture, chiropractic, herbs, energy work, or prayer, The operative factor behind all of these tools is the mind. I often cite a brilliant passage from the Manual for Teachers from the Course in Miracles where it says, quote, "Who is the physician? Only the mind of the patient himself. The outcome is what he decides it is. Special agents seem to be ministering to him, yet they but give form to his own choice. He chooses them in order to bring tangible form to our desires, and it is this that they do and nothing else. They are not actually needed at all. The patient could merely rise up without their aid and say, I have no use for this. There is no form of sickness that would not be cured at once." Close quotes. That's from the Manual for Teachers, Lesson 5. Alan writes, "Our preferred tools work because we have faith in them." You want some deeper insight into this? You might look into the book Suggestible You, because here's research done on what many people dismissively call the placebo effect, and what Bruce Lipton would ask us to call with something with more reverence, like the belief effect, and the power of belief in your life, the power of your mind energy is, they're still exploring the limits of it. And so, the Manual for Teachers says there is no sickness that would not be cured at once if the individual patient simply said with the fullest, deepest conviction, I have no use for this anymore. And the symptoms, the disease, the dysfunction would be gone. He says our preferred tools work because we believe they will work. We have faith in them. All healing is faith healing. A well-respected psychologist did a cross-cultural study of healing practices. He studied Western medicine, Chinese medicine, spiritual healing, shamanism, voodoo, and other healing modalities. The study found that the results for all healing methods were the same. 1/3 of the patients improved. 1/3 remained the same. 1/3 worsened. What better proof that healing or illness resides in the belief system of the patient more than the method? If we're not careful, ego can get a hold of our tool and wield it on its behalf. We think that, quote, my tool is the best tool or the only tool, and everyone else's tool is inferior or even wrong, close quotes. However, all tools work for some people, and we must respect their tool if it helps them. One night at a spiritual retreat, I observed a woman reading Emergency Magazine, True Stories of Ambulance Calls. I asked the woman, how can you read such dramatic material just before bedtime? She smiled and replied, I work on the rescue squad, and this gives me some good ideas. That material would have given me nightmares, but it helped that woman sleep well. Then he quotes a textbook from the Course in Miracles where it says, the outcome of the lesson that God's Son is guiltless is a world in which there is no fear, and everything is lit with hope and sparkles with a gentle friendliness. The outcome of the lesson that the Creator's offspring are guiltless, the outcome of that lesson is a world in which there is no fear and everything is lit with sparkles and a gentle friendliness. So, I'll take a breath and ask people if they have any comments or questions. We have some time left. Cammie's asking for my email again. It's tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. Not the word hyphen spelled out, but the dash. Mindshifters-academy.org. So, comments, questions, answers, soliloquies. I almost recited the call-in number again. We don't have a call-in number, but if you have the app, you can tap the phone icon and we can have a short conversation before we're out of time here. Today's Wednesday. That means there will be a support group again tomorrow night. And we welcome all comers. The more the merrier. All the information you would need to be able to join us is available on the mindshiftersacademy.org website. And there's a separate info page for Tuesdays and a separate one for Thursdays. On the off chance that there is a possibility that Celinda can connect. Are you there, Celinda?
Yes, I got very soft all of a sudden, and my volume all the way up. Can you hear me at all?
Yes.
Good. I hope I don't swallow my phone. But here we go. I am so impressed with this 5-star stellar show this morning that I'm going to download it if I can and replay it for myself, because based on the last 3 or 4 days of shows with you and Michael, I feel like I have been booted into a new possibility for my life, and thank you so much. This is just truly a blessing, and I have several friends that I think would deeply appreciate this, so I might offer it to them too, and my brother if he would like to hear it.
Okay, well, we will have that within a matter of a couple of hours at the whatever location where you get your podcasts. I get mine through the Apple Podcast app, but it'll also go out to Spotify and Amazon and Google App Store. So I'm glad you're finding it of use, and I will do what I can to upload it as soon as possible after the show. And then it usually takes an hour or so before it gets published out to the podcast apps.
And what was the name of the Apple app?
Well, Apple has their App Store and they have their podcast app. So if you don't have the most people who buy an Apple phone or an Apple device have the app for podcasts on their phone. It's a purple colored app icon.
Okay, I'll look for it, and then if it's not there, I'll contact Apple support, and they can help me put it on.
And then, once you find the Mind Shifters Radio with Dr. Michael Ryce and Jeanie in that picture, you just say, I want to follow this podcast, and then every time one is published, it's available for you in the app. It keeps track of them. And
now,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
And you can tell it to notify you or not.
Perfect. And also, are both shows as one podcast, or do I have to check back in for Michael's portion?
They're two separate. Since we've been on Needle, they are two separate shows. It's the same show, but it's two episodes of the same show. You're breaking up. I couldn't understand what you said.
that will help. Yeah, yeah. We're both very quiet probably today, but it's good to know it's not my phone. It's unfortunate that it's needle, but maybe not unfortunate at all because we're helping Allende just debug this new app. So that's wonderful.
All right. Well, thank you for calling. Thank you for listening, and let me know if you have any difficulty finding this podcast in your app store, and I will give you blessings and get ready to wrap up the show this first hour. Again, I'll remind people we have another group coming tomorrow night. It's absolutely free. It's on Thursday night. We run from 6:30 to 9 p.m. Central Time. And all the information you would need to join us free or pass that along to somebody else is on a separate page on the mindshiftersacademy.org website. And in the meantime, I will just remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. Blessings.